Howdy, all of you delicious people. I am here today to review The Bondsman, the whole first season. So, this overall story is very bare bones basic. We really just have a bondsman bounty hunter character that is to go from collecting normal people for his bounty hunting job to then getting killed and transitioning into collecting demon bounties. And we really, throughout the very first episode, it really tells us nothing really all that much about anything. So it kind of forces us to watch multiple episodes to understand what's going on and figure out how to kill these demons, because it kind of takes 2 episodes to kill one demon. And then eventually we go on to find out that, like, as these demons are continuing to arrive and eventually are to be a cheerleader, a deputy, uh, 2 guys at a pond or a lake or whatever. Like, there's a fisherman, and then there's a guy that proposes to his wife, and then there ends up being a kid. I don't know if I've left any of them out, if there's any other ones. And then by the very tail end of the season, we have this kind of special character that, of course, once immediately they said the name, I'm like, well, of course they go with that name. Like, that is like the go-to supernatural character name that has been in like every single thing I've ever read somewhere in a supernatural thing. And that character, of course, is to be called Lilith. But with me going on and saying this story is very basic and very thin, and like you really have your characters that are just like, man, these characters are really dumb. Like, I guess, like, I was just so easily addicted to it because, again, once I was to go through the first episode and be like, wait a minute, that's it? Like, I learned nothing from this show. And then the further I started to go into like the cheerleader episode, I was like, okay, like, there's some interesting visuals going on here. Okay, you suckered me in, show. Um, because you basically use the word supernatural to lure me into this and sucker me into this. So I guess I should watch this, right? Uh, so this show immediately reminded me of stuff similar to like Ash versus Evil Dead, even though Ash versus Evil Dead is a lot funnier and a lot better in a lot of ways. Whereas also, like, this show probably reminded me of like Stan versus Evil or Stan against Evil. Like, I always get that title confused. Um, but that show is also like pretty funny, and then is to really just have like a like retired cop that goes on and faces off against all of these supernatural entities, and so it's fairly similar to the Bondsman. So eventually, like, there's another element to this show that makes it fairly unique, and that is to be this like weird like pot of gold corporation thing that eventually is to give us this character Midge, who goes on and is to explain to Hub what's going on, and eventually is to be faxing him certain bounties that he is to go on and need to find, seemingly, like. And then also at some point in the show, like, we have to understand Midge's backstory and why she was to go on and be working for this bounty hunting company, because we come to find that Midge is working for the devil, as well as also Hub is working for the devil. And we find that the marks on their arms that they are to all have is to symbolize that they are uh, either going to hell or they are working for the devil because they have sold their soul. And so, but not to really go on and give this all away right out of the gate here, but like I'm trying to like really heavily tee this up for people, and also realize that I'm trying to do a way shorter video that I've probably ever done before, and not fully go on and explain this video until I feel necessarily to do so by eventually just saying like, well, um, let's just go into a quick bit of spoilers and kind of just chit chat about this, and then just call this a video because I'm just gonna go on and just attempt to just make shorter videos because really at this point in time, like the lengths of which that I've tried to achieve in previous videos, like what does that matter anymore? We also have this character called Lucky Callahan, which really ties into Hub's character or Kevin Bacon's character, and like it's trying to bring Hub back to Earth that he needs to go on and figure out a way to get rid of this character. But while that's going on, like Hub is still going on and trying to catch these demons. So like Lucky, his character becomes like the guy that gets away, and then eventually, the further and further we go into this season, it seems that Lucky is somehow like getting intertwined uh, with this whole demon thing, and assuming that he's working alongside Jesus for some goofy reason. Um, so there is some really good characters I feel in this show. Like, of course, like Hub's character bouncing off like his own mother. Like, there's some good dialogue there. Um, and also when Kitty gets her own like bulletproof vest. Um, and how like she's working alongside Hub's character, like that was a lot of fun. Um, Eventually, also when we get other people's character kind of rolled into Hub's demon hunting journeys, whether they're aware of it or not, um, makes for some eventually interesting episodes. To like, oh, are they gonna figure it out? Are they gonna go on and help him out with what's going on here? And also, like, eventually how we come into figuring out how to kill these demons, I was like, well, like, is it going to change every episode to episode to episode? Because every demon should have its own way of death. But no, every single demon just dies the same. And I was like, well, it's a kind of lazy way out if I've ever seen it in a show. To just be like, oh, once you figure out how to kill one demon, you can just basically kill them all off the exact same way. And I was like, okay, this doesn't really feel like a supernatural show to me because I feel like each demon should be having its own creative way to get killed. Because I've seen shows like Reaper where like the guy ends up getting from the devil like these weird, goofy assortment of items that he has to figure out a way to kill a demon every week. And some of the times it's like weirdly like a toy car or a or an 8-track tape, or it's just not a assortment of items that he has to just figure out how to beat the bad guy that week with the estrangement of whatever that ends up being. But anyways, so after going on and stating all of that, Hub at one point, of course, for every character has a deep secret, which eventually ends up getting to tie in right around the end of the season because eventually, like the last character is to tie into Hub's past and is to technically be haunting him. But yeah, so other than that, I think that there is probably not much else for me to go on and say about this show that isn't just directly just going into spoilers because like I feel that it's either like people have already watched this show or probably going to have to watch this show because maybe I've just enticed you enough by saying just enough. Um, I thought like yeah, I was suckered in, but I feel that this show, in all honesty, is like, hey, if you have no other show to watch, then check out The Bondsman. If you like a supernatural show and you're okay with just a bare bones basic show like this, then like just check the whole season out. Cause man, it like that very first episode does nothing for me. You have to watch multiple episodes. And then also eventually like the demons and their weird goofy special effects smoke screen things that they do is just very weird. uh but also like of course it's at some points this show feels very cheaply done. uh but so yeah, so with that said, like I would say that this show is okay. uh it suckered me in, it had some enjoyment, but like it's very just like it is the most basic show that I've ever seen. It really is. So let's just go into spoilers so I can wrap this bad boy up. So spoiler time, spoiler time. It's about that time again to spoil this whole season. So going into spoilers, we have Hub that goes on and chases this bounty, which leads him to putting this beehive into a person's hotel room. They open the door and come to find out Hub ends up getting surprised with a knife to the throat and he is supposedly dead. To then seemingly wake up with his throat cut and it all of a sudden starts to heal. So, Hub, here's where we see like the tape that goes, his duct tape that he has on his car, because I guess of his tailpipe, he puts it on his neck. So, and eventually by the time that he gets home, like his neck completely heals. Like he even at one point like is smoking and like smoke is like coming out of his neck because of there being a hole there. So Hub goes on to eventually just like not really understand what's going on with his life, but then the pastor that is in his town all of a sudden is to turn evil, and so Hub goes on to continue to find the people who had tried to kill him, and also that ends up connecting with Lucky Callahan. So Hub goes on to try and find the people who had tried to kill him, and that's where the pastor comes in to kill all of these people for Hub, and then eventually Hub is to try and kill this demon, and eventually the demon just kind of disappears for then Hub to go again back after it. So eventually Hub is to make his way back home, and here is then when we are met by Midge, and she's to have to then go on and explain to Hub that it's like, well, yeah, like you died, and like I'm a part of this pot of gold company, and uh, and they're kind of orchestrating for you to be this demon hunter. And if you don't go on, if you don't like slay these demons, then like uh, your contract is to be terminated, and then you will be sent to hell. And basically, they explain it that like Hub just kind of still being on Earth is kind of like a work release thing. I guess there's just way too many souls in hell right now, so I guess they just uh, gotta have him like stay on Earth every once in a while to just kind of do some just kind of evil bidding for whatever goofy reason. So eventually, after like Hub is to be given this information, and Kitty ends up going on and listening to this whole thing, she then is more like impacted by this than Hub is. Like Kitty goes on and asks like Hub, it's like, "Were you seriously killed last night?" And Hub is like, "Well, yeah, I guess I was." And Kitty's like, "And none of what she said like got to you." And Hub is like, "No." Like, so like Kitty is just like, well, you know what? If you're gonna do this, like, you're not gonna do this alone. So, like, she slaps on this bulletproof vest and it slaps the word "Mama Bear" against her vest, like, well, hey, I'm working alongside you. So the two of them go out to hunt down this pastor, and Kitty can't believe this because, like, my pastor, really, of all the people. And Hub's like, yeah, like, well, he's a demon now. So Uh, so the two of them make their way to this kind of warehouse, and eventually, when they come to find this warehouse, the pastor's there. But then, not only that, there is to be this sacrifice and this triangle that is to be around where the sacrifice is. And we'll come to find through every single episode, there is to be that triangle, and then there is to be that body, and then also we come to find that each one of these demons have this element about them. Like there's the air, the water, the earth, the fire, the whatever. Like as if this is like the fifth element going on here. And eventually, we'll come to find that all of these characters are killing people in specific areas to eventually put together the pentagram or whatever that goofy star thing is that you see on maps, because like that's always like the bare bones basics of putting together a supernatural show, is to like, well, hey, there's got to be like a reason why these characters are doing all this. And this will also lead us to the Lilith character, who of course ends up being this angel. So, and then come to find out that the Lilith character is to be tied to Hub's past, who is a character named Cheryl, that was this uh, waitress who Hub accidentally killed. Because Hub thought that it was Lucky because of the hat, but Cheryl accidentally was wearing Lucky's hat. So let's go on here. Uh so once facing off against this pastor, they go on and they set up this bear trap, and so Hub goes on and is to like shove this like refrigerator, and it ends up falling on this pastor and falls on his head. And so that's how they figure out how to kill the demon. And then the demon starts to burst into flame, and so it's like, okay, so that happens every single time. Yeah, I guess it does. So the following episode, we then have, I think right after that, here's where we have the uh I think here's where we have the cheerleader. The cheerleader, it seems, is going on, and she's uh going on her social media and she's lying about her friend and she's crying about it, and she's trying to do this so that way she can throw this character under the bus, so that way she can try to get this guy that she likes to be with her. So this girl's horrifically doing this, and then come to find out, I guess the world is to go on and get even with her, as all of a sudden her water is uncontrollably turning on. So this cheerleader character tries to like turn all of this water off, and it turns right back on, and it comes to find out once her tub ends up getting full that this demon forces her inside of it and she drowns. So eventually we would have Hub, who in this episode is with his son. And Hub, I think, is trying to realize that since he had a near death experience, he needs to do something with his family. That he needs to try to make amends and he needs to try to make things right. And so Hub is to go on and try to talk to his son to convince him that Marianne, who's of course Hub's ex-wife, and also like uh, Hub's ex-wife, and also like the two of them had a kid together, and this ends up being this kid that is with Hub this episode, and Hub is teaching this kid how to drive, yada yada yada. So eventually, what happens in this episode is while this kid is going on and driving, Hub is convincing him through all this documentation that Lucky's not a good guy, and the son turns to Hub. It's like, dude, I don't care. Like this guy is good to my mom, so like I don't care what he did. Like it doesn't matter. And so Hub is like, oh, okay, well, like so Hub just goes on and takes his son like on this demon trip with him because like he's not actually going to get into the action, but like Hub starts more and more and sees this pattern of needing to go into this house because all of a sudden like this entire house is like just filled with water, and then he continues on to find that this hydrant had kind of all three of its sides like opened, and then that leads to like, well, hey, like what's the biggest water source nearby? Oh, it's this pool. So Hub makes his way to the pool, and there is to be this janitor that's dead there, and there's a triangle with the pool equipment, and eventually this then leads to have Hub face off against this cheerleader who forces him to this water. And as Hub is seemingly drowning, even though I'm like, okay, wait a minute, like, is this guy dead? Like, is he just gonna pass out and just remain in the water? Like, I'm so confused. But I'm also thinking about like Wolverine, how when Wolverine was dunked into the water, like he kind of died until he came out of the water, because like even a person that can't die, like they can still, I guess, drown. So goes on and is facing off against this cheerleader and stabs her in the eye, and that's how he kills her. So eventually Hub makes his way kind of almost close to being out of this pool area, and the sheriff arrives, and so Hub now has to go on and call that his son is driving around and he's possibly driving drunk, so that way his son can get arrested, so Hub could get out of there without getting found and assumed a murderer, because Hub is trying to like, and also like for every one of these places there's always cameras around that Hub has to figure out how to like destroy or whatever so there's no trace. So Hub goes on to the police precinct, and Marianne and Cade, who's the son, is both there. And so and we have a bit of discussion all about Lucky and this and that, and how also Cade is wanting to go on and be this musician, but he's clearly not old enough yet. But eventually Hub decides to tell Marianne and Cade that, you know what, like, I think you guys should just get out of here, get out of town, because Hub is dealing with demons. Because eventually, within the following episode, where Hub faces off against this deputy, eventually Marianne ends up getting in the mix of things while tracking Hub's phone, trying to figure out what he's doing. So eventually, when Marianne does track Hub down, um, because eventually Marianne is to bump into Kitty, and Kitty is to try to frame Lucky on something, because Lucky is kind of in some way kind of like blackmailing Hub to say, like, well, hey, like, if you guys are going to turn me in, I'm going to turn you in, because Hub and his friend was to go on and witness one of the well, like, Hub's lackey was to go on and witness uh this supernatural event that was to happen with the pastor, and they took a number of photos and stuff like that. So, like, Lucky is now blackmailing Hub to, like, well, hey, I'm gonna show these photos to the authorities if you like try to arrest me for anything. And so Kitty goes in and takes a bunch of evidence to try and figure out how to get back at Lucky to be like, well, hey, if you turn us in, we'll turn you in. So yeah, that's the whole thing. So after Marion goes on and talks to Kitty, she then tries to track down Hub, and that leads her to this shop where eventually this deputy is attacking Hub, as Hub was to go on and find this trail of dirt that was to lead to this dead body of this kind of overweight person. So we have at a point where, like, especially around here, here's where Hub is to be a little like, okay, like, I've seen so many of these kind of triangle patterns now, like, there has to be something going on here. And he goes on and he starts connecting the locations of where these things all are, and he ends up starting to realize that, like, it becomes a star, and he's like, okay, like, there has to be other demons coming in, and there has to be a pattern here. So, but let's get back to this. So Hub goes on to to eventually be face to face with this deputy, and Marianne, trying to do the right thing, like, stabs this deputy in the back with this pickaxe, and it does nothing. And so she's like, "Wow, okay." And also, she sees Hub, like, shooting into him, and so Marianne's like, "Okay, this is not a normal guy." So eventually, like, there is, like, a shot in the head that ends up killing this deputy, and then Marianne just has, like, a face full of, like, blood and juice of man, and so she's showering, and, like, Hub is trying to talk to her like normal, and Marianne's like, "Can you give me a minute? I'm wiping off man juice off of me. Like, could you give me just a second here? Like, I'm freaking wigging out about, like, what all I just seen." So eventually, once she comes down from, like, showering, she eventually is like, "Oh, okay, so like that's not normal, right?" So Hub goes on and explains, well, like, well, yeah, like, the thing that I faced, yeah, that's a demon, and and also like your guy that you're with, Lucky, yeah, he tried to kill me. He cut my throat. And so Marianne, after hearing all of this story from Hub, doesn't really write him off as a crazy person. She believes everything that she says, or everything that Hub says, and so Marianne is like, well, okay, now I need to dump Lucky, and Hub is like, well, yeah, maybe you give me a second chance. So Marianne and Cade eventually start working with Hub and Kitty, uh, Hub's mother, to face off against the evil. And so, because eventually they just won't let Hub just work alone. They're like, oh, no, 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 like we're all gonna work with you, and we're gonna help you out. So, because eventually what ends up happening is during the time where there's two other demons that appear, Lucky is to go on and chain up Hub and want answers and want him to talk about what happened to Cheryl. Because again, Cheryl was to die in Lucky's bar. And then she disappeared because Hub buried her nearby where he lives. So, and then Hub kind of looking at that gravestone and like hoping that she's still there and knowing what he did and the snake that he did. So eventually, Hub, while being chained with Lucky torturing him, eventually Hub gets free, and also the two demons arrive within Hub's office and try to kill him. But luckily, I think Hub ends up taking one down with a shotgun and ends up taking down another with a chainsaw to the head. And Lucky ends up running away because he realizes that these guys that he's facing off against aren't quite normal. So after that, after the two demons, then of course there is to be the last one, and so they have to go on and figure out where this last demon is, and so they trace it to this one seemingly uh, like neighborhood is. So here's where the whole family gets together and they're pretending to be uh, gas leak technicians. And also, here's where Midge ends up coming into the fold here. So I guess I have to explain who Midge is. So Midge, come to find, ends up selling her soul so that way her kid could be cured of, I think, cancer or illness or something. And Midge ends up going on to figure out a way to sell all her items to try and pay for this procedure. And eventually, she's tried everything under the sun but sell her soul to be able to get this kid cured. And then, weirdly, when she's on the internet, this pot of gold thing comes up and it ends up like saying to her, it's like, well, hey, like, do you want to submit your application to basically just sell her soul? So she does, and then a guy appears at her place and is like, well, yeah, like, you're now gonna put together this whole pyramid scheme, and like every time this person that you are working with, every time that they get this soul, like you get this bump. So like it's a weird, goofy pyramid scheme that she ends up saying. So, but back at this gas leak. So they're all working together, gas leak, and this leads to this one kid that Midge cannot fire upon because it looks so much like her son. So the son ends up going on and like putting this uh this triangle mark amongst the ground, which leads to both Midge and this kid both going to hell. And so Midge is now just as dead as seemingly Hub is, but Midge still has to come back to Earth to work alongside Hub because eventually we come to find out that once this whole task of what they're doing is done, they have to just finally go back to hell now because really, like, their job will be done then. So at that point, they've gone on to then, like, they've had like all of the star pentagram things. Everything is now done. So this ends up unleashing Lilith onto the world, and she is to be Lilith through the Cheryl character. So Hub ends up finding out that the center of all of this star is to be his place, and Hub runs to the grave to find that Cheryl's grave has been dug up and she has left. So Hub then realizes he has to face off against Cheryl. So what he ends up planning on doing is like, well, hey, like, if these stars were to have gone on and created Cheryl from once she came, then maybe like putting together another star can trap her. So eventually they find that Lilith has this weakness to music, and also it seems that she hates men and has them all rip their jaws off, and then the women bizarrely are having this like kind of pose to her, and they bow to her, and I'm like, okay, whatever that is. So and then eventually, once she leaves an area, like all the women are just like, "What the heck happened here?" Because they were so baffled and confused. And then all the guys are dead. So eventually, Hub is like, "Well, hey, like I can go on and use these speakers to like have this like weird kind of vibration go on in the ground." So this forces Lilith to want to go to this music. So Lilith succumbs to the vibration of the music on the ground, and she appears, and here's where they set this trap around her to then have this star that is to trap her. And so what happens is that Lilith makes a deal with Hub. It's like, well, hey, like if I go on and I free myself from this person, like you'll go on and you'll be free from your obligation to the devil, because like the only sin that you really have is that Cheryl is dead because of you. Like, what if like I made this deal with you, and like and now and so if I free Cheryl, you're also free. And like Hub's like, heck yeah, like let's do this deal, because I guess he was to only really go on and think of himself. So, and that's what Midge says, like, all you think about is yourself. And Hub is like, well, like it's the best world for me. So Cheryl is now free, and Lilith goes into a crow, a bird, which in the very pilot episode, like the first thing we see when Hub is driving around is, I think, that same bird. So it's kind of a very foreshadowing thing that eventually goes full circle into having Lilith end up in this bird. So Marianne goes to the authorities, as well as also like Kitty is being arrested and like they're like being held, questioned, and whatever. So eventually the sheriff is to tell Marianne, it's like, well, hey, you need to tell Hub to meet at the club so we can like arrest him and hold him for questioning. So they make their way to this club, and what happens is that uh, we have Lilith that goes into Marianne. And so Marianne is singing this tune by the end of this thing. And we start to see that people are under the control of her. Guys are starting to grab their jaws. And women are like kind of posing. And Marianne is now turning to Hub and it's like, well, hey, like if you work with me, like, uh, and so like that's how they kind of wrap up the season with like a possibility of Hub. Like, is he gonna work with Marianne? Is he gonna try to defeat her? Because also like he doesn't want to go on and try to kill her because Lilith is in Marianne's body. So and Marianne is giving the ultimatum like, well, hey, if you work for me, I'll free Marianne from my body. So yeah, so but then also there is the whole backtracking scene where uh like the whole flashback scene we had where Hub was talking uh to Lucky, and like this is when we start to find that like Lucky is with Marianne, and like Hub ends up going on and punching Lucky in the face, and Hub ends up getting thrown out of the bar, and so yeah, so that's where Hub turns around and goes back to the bar to try to find Lucky to try to kill him, and because there's a threat that is to be from the security guard that like, well, hey Hub, like Lucky's gonna try to kill you, and so Hub thinks that he should get to Lucky first, and then he shoots who he thinks is Lucky, and it ends up accidentally being Sharon, the girl from behind the bar, the bartender. So with that said, I think I've covered everything. I'm gonna get out of here. I probably didn't cover anything because I didn't have any notes, and then also like I tried to wanted to do this quickly, but also looking at it again, like I've done the same amount of time that I've probably done in any video, but probably a lot shorter. So I'm gonna get that out of here so I can just put this video out. I'm sure it'll do just severely well or surprisingly well because like at this point, like pretty much a lot of my videos are really just dead at this point. I don't think there's any turnaround for my channel anymore. Like I'm just like gonna have to just either do this for fun or just stop doing it. I don't know. Or really just force myself to do shorter videos. But either way, uh, it's time to really figure something out. So with that said, I'm gonna get out of here. Bye, everybody. Bye, everybody.